To get started with this project, we need an IDE, and I'm going to use PyCharm. We also need Python to be installed on our computer. So I do have Python 3.8. So to check, I can go to a command prompt and then I'll say here Python -- version. And this one shows Python 2.7. But if I type here Python 3 -- version, you can see that I have 3.9. So I'm going to go open PyCharm and create a new project, and the default location is my home directory PyCharm projects, and the name of the project can be anything. I'm going to call this as TutorialsHub, and the reason I'm calling this as TutorialsHub is because the DB that I have contains information about various classes, and each class will have multiple video lessons. So effectively we're going to have two tables, classes and lessons. I'll be showing that in a few minutes. The new environment using virtual environment or virtual env, and then the base interpreter is going to be my Python 3.9. That's the one that you see over here. I don't want to inherit any global site packages, and I don't want my current modules to be available for all the projects. So basically I'm going to just leave it to the defaults, and this one I believe already exists. I'm going to just call it as -new. You can name it anything you want, as I said. Click create to create the project. So the main.py contains some boilerplate code. I don't need any of this. I'm going to just get rid of this. And also I need to add Flask to my list of dependencies. As you can see, in external libraries, I have only these. And if you look at site packages, I don't have Flask over here. To add Flask, you go to PyCharm and then Preferences. On Windows machines, it would be under File. I believe it's called Settings. So go to Preferences and you will see this dialog box. Under the current project here, you have Python interpreter. If you don't see, or if you see something like this, you can either expand this or click on this file, click on this option Python interpreter, and then you see a couple of them over here. Click on the plus symbol, add Flask, install package. It takes a minute or less, and then close this dialog box, and you can see here also on the background a lot of dependencies have come. Click OK to come out of this, and now you have Flask available to your project. The very first thing that you have to do in any Flask application is to create an object of the class Flask, and then using which you can start your development web server. So that's going to be very simple. Just have to say from Flask import and Flask. You can see F capital, which indicates the class name. And then I'm going to simply say here app equals to Flask. You need to supply a name. Any name is okay. Since I'm calling it as TutorialsHub, I'll just leave it as it is. We'll define a if condition to check if this is the one that you have to run. Of course, in PyCharm, you can simply type main and press enter, and you'll get this if dunder name equals to main. Then you can simply say here app.run and then leave that parameters as it is. So with this, now we will be able to run our project. So let's do that by clicking this green button, or right click and then say run, or you can simply click this green button over here. And it simply comes up with this log. As you can see that it's not terminated, which means your server is up and running. It's accessible at http:// this is your local IP address, which means it's localhost. If you click on this, it's going to open in the browser, and you can see that it comes with some kind of message. If you visit anything other than this port number 5000, you will see a default error message from Google Chrome indicating that it cannot reach to that server. For example, if I copy this, go to a new tab, paste, and then change the port number to something like 5001, you can see this is where Google says I can't reach to that server. However, here Google is able to go to that server but not able to find any corresponding HTML page. So to provide that, we can go back to our code and define any function or method. So let's say def main, and then I can say return something like hello world. But in order to say that this is the string that we want to output when the user visits the home page, we have to say @app.route and then say slash. So this indicates that whenever the user visits the root of your application, that is localhost 5000/, this would be the output to be given to the browser. So if I restart our application, go back to the browser and refresh, you should now see that there is a hello world. So Flask is that simple. You just have to render some output onto the browser for a given URL. Now note that I have not given anything over here. For example, if I type here /about, I get an error. But if I come back here and then change this to /about over here and reload, you will see now that when I refresh /about page, it will give you hello world. But if I go to the home page, I don't see anything here because I don't have any handler for the given route. So let me bring this back to /. It's a good idea to provide some HTML content instead of a hello world. So what we can do is we can create an HTML page over here or an HTML file and then render the content of that HTML instead of returning a string. So Flask identifies a folder called templates inside your project. So I'm going to create a new folder or directory called templates. And inside that, I'm going to create a file. Let me name it as home.html and add a default message. So to start with, I'll say this is home. I'm going to change this and I'll say here h1, this is the home page. We can add a couple of other tags like HR for horizontal rule, probably another paragraph that says powered by Python and Flask. So let's save the file, go refresh this, go back and then reload. You don't see anything other than hello world because right now I do have an HTML, but my / returns hello world. So in order to say that we need the content of this home.html to be rendered, we can simply say here render template to be imported from Flask and then say instead of return hello world, I can say return render template and then type here home.html. So this function reads the content of the HTML and then converts that into a string, and that string will be returned from this particular function. So I'm going to rerun the project, go back and refresh. You can see that the content of the HTML comes over here. With this, you can also supply some additional data if at all it is there here. For example, I'm going to say here title equals to, for example, hello Flask, and maybe I can say subtitle equals to something like, say, developed by Vinod. So instead of This is home page. I want that hello Flask, and instead of this I want to say developed by Vinod, whatever those two variables are there. You can pass these title and subtitle to this render template as a additional functions, additional parameters. So you can simply say here, probably a new dict you can supply, or individual variables also you can supply. For example, I can say title equals to the value coming from that variable, and then I can say subtitle equals to subtitle like this. So this text here, this is going to be the key in the home.html I can use to get the value of this one, so which is hello Flask. And similarly, in the home.html I can access subtitle, which is nothing but the value of this variable. So you can keep something different here. For example, I can say ttl and stTL. So while this title here represents this variable and subtitle represents this variable, this TTL and STTL, they are the keys that you can use inside the home.html. For example, I can go to this home.html and I can change this to a pair of double curly brackets like this, and then simply say here TTL. The value of TTL, which is nothing but this title, which is hello Flask, that actually comes and be substituted over here. Like that, I can also say here STTL, and then I should get the subtitle over here. Let's rerun this, go back over here. This was the old content. If I refresh now, you can see it says hello Flask, developed by Vinod. Now, instead of supplying individual variables like this, I can create a dictionary out of those two and then pass it to this render template as a single variable instead of multiple variables. So if I supply here something like d1 equals to dict of title equals to title, and maybe I can say ttl equals to title and stTL equals to subtitle. Now D1 is the dictionary that is locally available over here. I can supply that D1 as data like this. Now we don't have access to TTL directly because I did not supply TTL and STTL here. So if I rerun this here, you can see that when I refresh, you don't see anything, primarily because there is no TTL and STTL. So inside H1 and inside paragraph, there is no TTL, STTL. And that's because I didn't supply TTL and STTL, but I supplied data. Now I know that data is a dictionary, so I can say that this is a key called TTL inside data. And the same thing I can do that for this. So data being a dictionary, TTL is a key, STTL is a key. So if I refresh here now and then come back, refresh over here, we get our code back. So this is how you can do some work in a function, collect some data. This data may come from DB as well, and then pass it to a HTML to get the content. Now the HTML that we use may have some header, footer and stuff like that. So which may be common across multiple pages. So we may also want to include some styling and other stuff. So let's get rid of all these title, subtitle, data, all those things from this example. We'll simply say we just want HTML to be rendered. But the HTML itself will add some nice stuff. For example, let's add a CSS over here. Now a CSS is added using a link tag, and then you say rel equals to style sheet, type equals to text/CSS, and then href equals to a location of your CSS file. Now for the sake of simplicity and making our application look very professional, I'm going to use Bootstrap CSS framework, and I'm going to use a styling theme from bootswatch.com. So if you go to bootswatch.com, you will see that a lot of styling options we have. So I'm going to select, for example, this Space Lab. I can right click on the download button, copy the link address, and then come back to our href, paste over here. Of course, I can change this to any other theme that is available in bootswatch.com and they will change it automatically. And I'm going to provide some basic settings over here. So the first thing I want to have is a kind of a title bar like this, the blue bar what you see over here. I want it for my application. And inside that I want to have a gap. As you can see, there's a gap on the left side and the right side. And inside that I want to have this some kind of a heading. So let's give that. And inside the body now we need to give a div class equals to alert and alert dash primary. And inside that I'm going to type div class equals to container. And then inside that I'm going to give h1, probably tutorials hub. That's something that I want to give. Now this one makes the background blue color. This class makes the width to be around 1100 pixels. And then this is a typical heading 1. So if I refresh here and then go back to the browser, reload, you'll see now that I have a background and I have some kind of a heading over here with a gap or a margin. So if you want to change this appearance to something else, you see that that gray color came because of that. I can choose this Yeti, which is going to have a blue color background. So if I go back over here, change this to Yeti, rerun the project, go back and then refresh. You'll see now we have this tutorials hub like this. So this is the way you can include a styling. Now that I've done with this, you can probably choose a different theme if you want later. I don't need that tab anymore. I'm going to keep this back. Now likewise, if you want some kind of a footer, you can have here, say for example, div class equals to text center. As the name suggests, it's going to align the text to the center. And I can type here some copyright symbol, say copy 2020-21, probably 2020-2021. You can say all rights reserved by probably your team. In my case, I'm going to give here ahref equals to, say for example, https vinod.co, that being my website. I'll say learn with Vinod. So if I rerun and then go back and refresh, you will see that the footer is going to be right here. I would like to have the footer somewhere at the bottom. I want to have a minimum gap of around, let's say 500 pixels or 400 pixel. I can introduce another div here, probably class equals to container. That is to make sure that the width will be 1100 pixel or less. And then I can also say that here additional style of, say, min height of around 450 or 500 pixel. That should be okay. So I'm going to refresh here, reload the page. You'll see that there is a minimum of 500 pixel gap. Of course, it depends on the computer resolution, how much gap is there here. So I have a bigger screen, so there's a gap of 500 pixel here anyways. All right, so this is how you set up your home page. I also want to have some kind of menus. So the menus probably for viewing the list of all the classes, probably going back to the home page. And if you have some, let's say for example, information about your team and stuff like that, probably you want to give some information there as well. So to make sure that you have a nice header, I can give here something like probably maybe I can say here another div just for the sake of segregation. I can say ahref equals to slash, indicating clicking on which it should always take you to the home page. So I can type here home, and then I can type here ahref equals to let's say we are going to come up with something called class list. And when we select the class list, we want to see the list of all classes. So I say here view classes. So if I reload and then come back, refresh over here, you can see that I got something like this. Now, if you want to make it look like a button, you can just add additional class over here from Bootstrap, btn primary. And the same thing I'm going to copy and paste to the next one as well. And run this, come back and refresh. You'll see that I have two button-like objects. Of course, this one will anyway come back over here, but if I click on view classes, it says not found. And that's because we don't have anything mapped to /class list. And that would be done in the main.py. So like this, we need to have a function that actually renders the view class HTML, something of that sort. So let's go over here to the view class, or rather class list, right? So because I gave here class list, so I'm going to write a function here called def, maybe I can say class list. The name of the function need not match the name of the HTML or name of the route. For the time being, I'm going to say here return render template, and then I'll supply something like class list.html. And I don't have this HTML, I need to write a new one, but I'm also going to say @app.route, and then I'll say /class list. Why is this? Because this is what we have used in your ahref. So if I click on this now, we do have a handler, and that handler will take care of rendering the HTML. Now I don't have this HTML, so it would give me an error. The error would be like error 500 because this file doesn't exist. So all I have to do is to create this file inside the templates, like how we did that home.html. And I'm going to create a new HTML file, give this name class list HTML, and this is okay. So I'm going to just type here class list and like h1 class list. Now I'm not going to make any bootstrap stuff over here for a reason. I'll show you that in a minute. I go here, rerun this and go back. Click on the home, no problem. Click on the view class. This is how it's going to look like. So my header is gone, my footer is gone, my links are gone, but I still see the output coming from that. Now, in order to maintain the common look and feel, like the common header, common menus, common footer, we can extract some part of home.html and then keep it as a common template that can be reused by other HTMLs. So what I can do is I'm going to select everything from here, create a new file. I can name it anything I want. It's my choice. So I'm going to name it as template.html and paste that over here. So I replaced everything. Obviously this is the template HTML, but in home.html I can delete whatever that was there earlier, and I can use a syntax called as a what is that syntax name? Anyway, so you have to say here curly bracket percentage and then say extends, you can say template.html and close that with the similar bracket. So what it means is that anytime home.html is asked, that is in the main.py, we have said that home.html is what is required, it will actually try to render this, but this one says that, hey, I'm not alone, I actually is an extension, I am an extension of template.html. So the content of the template.html will be placed over here. So if I rerun this project now, you can see that there is no change. If I refresh over here, I still see this. Now in my home.html, I have removed everything but added this one line, and I still get that. Now in the class list HTML also, I can do the same thing. I can remove everything and then say, hey, I am an extension of template HTML by typing extends template.html like this. Now you can see that when I rerun, if I go over here, it says homepage, no problem. Class list also renders the same thing. But I want to have something different for both of them. And whatever that I type here should change probably something inside this. For example, let's come back and put a div over here. And then I'm going to type here, probably I would like to add a comment. This is how you add comment in HTML. And I'll say this section varies. So I want to just say that this section is something that varies. Now, how do I do that? You use this syntax called Jinja syntax. So you say curly bracket percentage, and then say here block and a name of the block. You can name anything you want. I can say B1, B2, whatever that I want to give. And the name I give here is, for example, I can say main, or maybe I can say content. Again, the name of this block can be anything. I just named it as content. You need to end this also by typing end block like this, which means this part can be dynamically changed by your home.html or class list HTML. In case if that home.html doesn't have anything for this block, you can also have some default content over here. For example, I can say this is the default content. So if I rerun this over here now, since home.html and class list HTML, they don't have anything different for the specific block. If you see now, it simply says this is the default content. I click on view class or home, it's the exact same thing. But we do have an opportunity to change that. For example, I can come here and say that, hey, block content, now I can say that is going to be different over here. So I'll say that maybe I'll type here H1 or H2. I'll say welcome home or something like that. Oops, I can say welcome home. Probably a HR if you want. And then probably you can say, hey, this is the team members or something like that. You can say that tutorials, you can say computer tutorials with no ads. We can say computer tutorials developed by maybe your name. I give my name using Python and Flask. Okay, so this is the content or the text to be or the HTML to be rendered within this content of my template HTML. So currently the template HTML has this H3, and in the home.html we have a substitution for that. In class list HTML we don't have a substitution for that. So which means if I go back to this code, and you can see that in the home page, okay, I think I have something wrong in my application. Let's go check. It says here I think there must be something spell mistake. We have an end block. You can see that I haven't closed that properly with a percentage. So the Jinja syntax expects a bracket properly. I go back and I reload. You can see now it says welcome home, computer tutorials developed by Vinod using Python and Flask, whatever that you decide what you want. However, if I click on view classes, you will see that it still contains the default content. Now this is something that I want to now change based on what actually we have in our database. So before actually integrating that with the database, what I want to do is I want to put each of the classes as one card. So if you ask what is a card, let's go to a website called getbootstrap.com, which helps you understand what is the Bootstrap CSS framework all about. Go to the documentation section, look for cards, and you can see that you get the card over here. A card is something that looks like this. I have a small image. I can change the size of that, of course. And then I have a title and I have some content. I have a button here to click on which and do something about that. Okay. Now this is basically a card. Now I want to have a card for each of my classes. So let's go to our code here in the class list. Here I'm going to just declare a list consisting of probably few tuples. So I'm going to go declare here. Maybe I'll say classes equals to a list consisting of couple of tuples. Now the tuples is going to contain let's say an image src, right? So the maybe I may say something like an image source or something like that. Um, so let's just give here a image name. The name of the image could be anything. Um, let's just take an example of a picture. So I'll say HTTP or HTTPS lorem pixel.com slash let's take probably around 400 by 300 picture, and I'll just take up something like say city/2, some random picture name. So if you copy and open this in a browser, you may see some picture over there. Or find any image for that matter and then get that. That's a little weird. Let's go and check lorempixel.com. Let's look at this vehicles. There's a bunch of vehicles. I think that site probably may be down. I'm going to use a different picture. So to go to a different picture, I'll go to pixabay.com and let's select this picture. There's a picture over here. If you see that free download, I can select this picture. 640 by 246. I think this picture has come here. Now you can see vehicles. All right, so cities, you can see that there's some picture. I'm going to leave that to this picture, not worry about other pictures. So I need an img src and some name over here. So I'm going to have here, this is the image name, and let's have some kind of a content that says probably the name of the class. Let's say this is a, maybe I just type here something like beautiful city. Okay. And maybe I think that should be good enough for now, nothing else. Maybe I'll add one more something, New York or something. So this is one, and I'm going to copy this part, paste it another time, maybe another time, maybe another time, 3, 4 of them. Maybe I'll have 5 of them, okay? Or probably say 6, 7, 8 I'll have initially. Later we'll get this from DB. But right now I have this kind of stuff. Same picture, doesn't matter. If you want, you can give different numbers there. Now I want this information to be sent to here. So I can say data. I can directly type classes directly like this equals to classes. So basically I'm making this list of tuples available to this HTML. But what can I do with this one? I have a bunch of them over here. I can loop over each one of the pictures or each one of these tuples, take one tuple at a time, and then produce something like this. And as you can see that this entire section has a copy button over here. I can click on this to copy, come back to my class list HTML. First of all, I have to say that I have to start using a block, and then that's going to be an end of the block. So the name of the block I had given is called content, and this is going to be a substitution for that. I'll say end block. So whatever I type here will now replace this section, and that's what I want. So what do I want here is I need to display those images or the class information. To do that, so I can go and start a for loop over here. Again, I can use a Jinja syntax. So first I'll put one picture and then I'll show you how that's going to look like. I'll say here, probably I just paste this one. This is class equals to card, width equals to 18 rem. I'm just going to leave that as it is, but I'm going to eventually remove this. The src here is supposed to be coming from this one, but that's one tuple out of many. So in other words, I need to loop over this. So in order to loop over this, I can start the for loop over here like this. For, this is the typical Python loop. You can take a variable, say CL for class, in you can say classes. So what is this classes? That comes directly from here. So we are supplying classes, we get the classes. That's what we are doing right now. So we know that this represents a list. This will be one tuple at a time. So I'm going to complete this. Of course, in Python, whenever we use a for loop, we put a colon here and indent everything, but this is not really Python. It's a Pythonic syntax, but it's called Jinja. So you need to close the loop somewhere, and that's where you're going to say that, hey, this is the end of the for loop that we have. So we have a for loop and we have a div/div inside that. So now if CL is one tuple, CL of 0 gives me the image, CL of 1 gives me this, CL of 2 gives me this. So I can go over here now and then I can say, hey, I don't want this src to be just dot dot dot, but I want that to be CL of 0. That's what I want. And probably the name of the, probably whatever the name, second parameter I given, I can type here CL of 1, and probably this also is going to be CL of 1, like this. And probably some kind of a text over here, which is going to be maybe the who created this class. In our example, it's going to be like the word or the New York. That's basically what we are looking at. So we can just type here CL of 2 like this. I don't need this button, so I can get rid of that. And let's format, rerun, and note that I have 8 pieces of data over here, although they're all same. If I come back here and then refresh, this is the view class list. So if I refresh over here, you can see that I have a card that has got the title, then you have the New York, whatever. But they're all coming one below the other. I wanted that one next to each other. Now, for which we're going to use what's called as a grid system with the rows and columns. Now, in other words, we want to divide this entire you can say page width as one row. We're going to consider it as one row where I want to display multiple columns. Maybe you want to display 3 columns, 4 columns, etc. And each column is going to be given a grid size. And in a single row, you can have maximum of 12 grids. So if you want 2 columns, then you have to allocate like 6 each. So because one column will take 6 grids, another will take 6 grids, so total of 12. So since I want maybe 4 of them, I can say that the grid for each of the column is going to be 3. So 3 times 4 is 12. So all I have to do is to surround this entire for loop with a div class equals to row. That's how you make it as one row, and end the row after the for loop ends. That's how you do it. And in a row, you need to say these are all the columns. And the columns must be 3 columns or 4 columns. That is something that you may have to give. Now, I don't need this anymore. So I don't need to give this as this width anymore because it's going to be automatically taken. So I can also say here, along with the card, it also has to be a column. And I can say that it has to be it should be of 3 grids or 6 grids, etc. Now, in a medium device, like you can say tablets, like iPad, for example, I want this to have 3 grids, but in a smaller than iPad, bigger than a phone, or probably if you tilt the phone horizontally, that's called as a small device. So I'll have to say call SM, and then I'll say 6. And if you have a mobile phone and you're holding it in a portrait style, so it's a extra small device. I want a total of 12 grids. That means the full width for one class. I'll show you that in effect as we go forward. And this entire thing also should be clickable. So I should be able to click on that, but we'll come back to that in a minute. When I refresh over here now, you can see if I come back and reload, you can see that I have one class for every. Now, if you change this from, you see that this is 3 grids and each one of them are 3 grids, so total of 12. If I change this to 4, so you can see that I am going to change this to 4 over here, because this is going to be 4 plus 4, 8 plus 4, 12. There is no more space for this one, and this goes to the next row. That's how it is automatically going to be shifted. So if you see that now, this is how it's going to look like. Now, if this is what you want, you can keep it like this. I'm just going to go stick back to the 3 so that I can see 4 classes. These are all going to be classes in one single row. Again, it's your choice. You want to have it as 3, 4, your choice. So let's leave it as 4. I think it might be good to have 4, means 3 classes in one single row. All right, so that's going to be okay, but we want this data to come from database tables. Also, whenever I move the mouse on this, I need to be able to click on this. So the better thing that you can do is, instead of using this div, you can say a href equals to, right now I'm not going to do anything over here in href, but you will see that it would look like a hyperlink, like, you know, you can click on that. You can see that it's showing me like a fingertip over here. And that's something that I would like to have, right? So let's go back over here and make some changes. So now we need to get this data from the database, right? So where is the database? I don't have a database over here. Now I need to copy the database file and keep it in my work folder, which is this TutorialsHub folder relative to main.py. So I do have a copy of that in my probably under downloads I must be having. Let me just share this. All right, I have it over here. This is the file tutorials.sqlite3. I'm going to copy that and then come back over here and then probably see if I can paste over here. All right, I think I can. Yeah, it is. I can paste over here. You can see that file. Now this is a DB file. This is equivalent of MySQL, but in a single file. It's not a server, but it can act like an SQL RDBMS. It's a database management system. I can query this and all those stuff. So the first thing that we have to do is to load this data using the SQLite 3. So I'm going to import that. So I'll say import SQLite 3. This is part of Python. I don't have to do any installation. It's already available. So I'm going to just type here the name of the file. Let's call it as database equals to the file I have is called tutorials.sqlite3. The name of the file can be anything, but right now I have this as the name, right? So that's the file name. Now I need to open this when Flask is started. So when Flask begins its, the start, when we run the project and the Flask starts for the first time, I want this to be open, and later when Flask shuts down, we want this to be basically closed. That's what we want to do. So I'm going to write a function here. So def get underscore db, any name is fine. I'll say here db equals to get attribute. So that's the function. So we say get attr. We say g, some variable, doesn't matter, but we want to say database. In other words, what we are trying to do is we are going to set up the database and make it available through this particular function getDB. That's all we are trying to do. We're going to keep this database as an attribute that's going to be there. So if this DB is none, of course G is a module that is coming from Flask, so you may have to say G for global, so that's there now. So we're going to basically try to see, do we have an attribute called underscore database in this G? If it is there, retrieve that, but if it is not there, return none. So that means if, for the first time, of course, if DB is none, which is true, I'm going to say here DB equals to G dot underscore database, or rather underscore database, that's the attribute that I'm using, equals to, we'll say SQLite3 dot connect to the database variable that we created over here. So in other words, we are just trying to see if this attribute called underscore database is not set up initially. We are assigning this database connection, and the same thing I'm also storing it in DB. But if it is already there, every time I call this function, I'm just trying to check if database is already open or not. If it is open, I'm just going to return that. If it's not open, I'm going to open this. So that effectively this code is executed only once. And then I'll also say return DB so that we have access to this everywhere. This get DB will always return the DB, but the DB is opened only once, not all the times. But we also want to close the connection when Flask shuts down. That means if you click on this red button, at that point in time, I want to shut down or I want to close the DB connection. So how do I do that? You can write a function, any name is fine, def, let's call it as close con or connection, and if there is any problem, we'll receive that exception. Technically that's really not required, but this function is always called automatically by Flask, so it is mandatory for us to write this function, the parameter called exception. So we're going to say db equals to get attribute of g from the global context, get the attribute called database, and if it's not there, give me none. But if db is not none, then we need to close that. So that's all we have to do. So if it is not none, then we'll say db.close. This is only to say that, hey, if you never open the database, no need to close. But if it is opened, obviously it is going to be referencing to some kind of a connection, and that connection will be closed. And that's what we want to do over here. But in order to tell Flask that you have to call this at the end of your lifetime, so you have to say here @app.teardown app context. So this decorator tells Flask to automatically execute this when it is being shut down or torn down. All right. So that's basically our DB setup. Now, whenever I want to get the data from the DB, I just have to call this function and I will be able to use that. So to come back over here right now, all I need is, let me get rid of this entire classes because I don't need the classes. Then I'm going to say here, let's say cursor equals to get db, the function that we wrote, gives me a cursor. So I'm going to say cursor. I don't have to close the cursor though. And all I have to do is to get data from the classes. So I'll say here cur.execute select star from classes. Now I would like to show you the content of what is there in the classes. So I will also copy a file, which is this dbscript.sql. I copy that and then come back to my code over here. Let me paste it, and it's pasted. I'll open that file. You can see that the classes contains an ID, a title, channel, thumbnail, and then I also have something called slug. But let's keep that as it is. But we are interested in a thumbnail, that is the image. You can see that there is a thumbnail over here. Let's select some thumbnail from here. So let's say copy this and open that in the browser. And I'll give a thumbnail from YouTube basically. So this is the thumbnail which I want. And likewise, you can copy any thumbnail and verify what kind of thumbnail is that. So that's going to be the thumbnail. So we do have a lot of information. So but you need to know that the sequence, this is going to be a tuple. So this whole thing is going to be retrieved as a tuple. So the first column in the tuple, that is 0, is ID, 1 is title, 2 is channel, 3 is thumbnail. That means in the class list HTML, this thumbnail is going to be 3, and this is going to be 2, and this also is going to be 2. I guess let's go check what is that. Yeah, I think this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So I think this is going to be 1, this is going to be 2. Let's keep it as 1, right? So this is the image, thumbnail. This is the title of the class, again the title of the class, and this is the channel on YouTube where you can find that class. So that's made the changes. Now let's go here and then store the classes as a cur.fetch all. So all the data from the cursor I'm retrieving and passing it to classes. So if I just refresh here now, hopefully if I go back to this and reload, I should see 55 classes that are there in this database. There are 55 class along with their thumbnails are there. If I refresh here, I should see them respectively. As you can see, we got that. All right. So instead of hard-coded values, now I have all the data coming from the database. And those database, of course, if I click on this, nothing happens because it's going to go back to the home page or the current page itself, because I have just given ahref equals to an empty string over here, right? So this has to point to some valid location, and that's the next step, right? So let's go to our main.py. In fact, let's go to the class list HTML. And in the class list HTML, let's provide here a link to view the class. Now, what is the class? Let's say this class called Learn Python with Socratia. So that's the link. And if you carefully observe the DB script SQL, I have a slug as a part of this. I could also use the ID, but I'm going to make a URL friendly text on the address bar. So this is this is a unique text in the entire database table. Okay, so out of all the classes, only this particular class has this slug. Now it is URL friendly, means people can read from the URL and make out what it is rather than just numbers. So I want to say that in the class list HTML that hey, when you click on this, go to a URL called /view, and view as in like I want to view the class, and then I'm going to just type here slug, which is nothing but CL of 4. We saw that earlier in the DB, it's the index 4. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I want to provide a hyperlink to view slash that whatever the slug. So if I refresh over here now, you can see when I click on this, on the address bar, you will see, oh, I need to refresh this. When I click on this, you will see that it says view / learn Python with Socratia. Whereas if I select something like this, click on that, it says view / Ajax / dash tutorial for beginners. That's the kind of text that I get. So it's very URL friendly, but right now it's not working. We need to have a URL mapping for that also. But as you can see, for the first one, it was view / something else. For the second one, view / something else. That means in the path, this is constant, but this part varies, right? Variable part of the URI. We call it as a URI segment. So this is a URI segment, and this is another URI segment, but that is not fixed. So we go here and define a new function over here. Anywhere, I'm going to just write a function, def, let's call it as view class. And I need an information about the name of the class that I'm interested in viewing. So I'll assign a default of none. And in that class, which lesson you are going to be part of, right? Because initially when I click on that, so if I go here, when I click on this, I would like to watch the very first video, but I also will have multiple lessons, and I also want to know which lesson I'm going to be watching. So right now, I'll simply type here, let's say lesson name, and also assign a default to this. For the timing, let me say pass, and then I'm going to map this to @app.route. I'm going to say /view. So this means that if you simply click the view, it should come to this particular location. Even if I don't have the class name information, it's coming to this directly. But if you have come for a particular class, let's say, for example, /view / and the second part is dynamic, as we have seen. To tell Flask that the second part of the URI is dynamic, I'm going to type here, say class name. So that should match what is the variable that I've given. So whatever the second part of your URL, that will be assigned to this. This is one. But it is also possible that sometime the user might have clicked on a particular lesson to watch the lesson within the class. So we want that also. So I'm going to copy this and paste. But I'm also going to go give here something called lesson _ name, which means along with that, along with the class name, if I come back with a name of the lesson, that will be assigned to this. Now notice that this should match a variable, and this also should match a variable. So I got something like this. So a couple of things that we will do over here. First, I'm going to define a dictionary here called data equals to, I can say dict, an empty dictionary. But if the user directly types /view without referencing to any class, now we want that user to go back to probably home page or class list. And how do I do that? You need to first import something called URL for. So this is going to automatically generate a URL for a given, you can say, function. So I'm going to just come down over here and then I'll check if class name is none, right? We're going to say return redirect. Redirect is also a function that is available over here. Let's import that redirect and then come here, return redirect to means send the user back to a URL for class list. Whatever the class list parameter is there, that's where you need to go. For example, notice that I'm in the home page right now, and if I type here /view directly, I hope I rerun this over here once. Let me rerun that and go to the home page once, okay? And now if I come down and then say view, press enter, you can see that it is redirected me to class list. I didn't type this class list, but I was redirected. The user will be redirected to a different page. That's what is going on over here. Of course, if the class name is there, okay, if the class name is found, then we want to get the data corresponding to that class, all the class information as well as lesson information. So like, you are viewing so and so class. So I'm going to say here now, if class name is not none, right? So I'm already there now. So I can say cursor equals to getDB.cursor, and then I'm going to execute a query. So I'll say cursor.execute. Let's get the data for that particular class, right? So the user has given a class name. What would be the class name? The class name would be like learn Python with Socratia. So that's the name. That's basically a slug. So I'm going to say here execute select star from class where slug equals to, and then I need to pass the value. And for the cursor.execute, you need to supply values for each question mark as a tuple. So I'm going to supply a tuple here, and that's the class name. But if you give like this, it's not a tuple. You need to give a comma here to make this as a tuple, or you have to say tuple of class name, something like that you need to supply. But anyway, we got a tuple over here right now. So this executes, but what if the user has typed view/ASDF? It is possible that there may not be any class, right? So it is possible. Let's fetch the class equals to cursor.fetch1. Why 1? Because if at all there is a match, there is going to be only one class for a given slug. If there is no match, then CL is none. So we may say that, hey, if you have typed view/ASDF, where I don't have any class called ASDF, so I can check if CL is none, then same thing, redirect the user to the list of classes so user can click on something. That's the whole idea there. So if I refresh over here now and then go here view/ASDF, press enter, you can see that I should have been redirected to that. All right, so maybe let me check here, or len of CL equals to 0, then we want to redirect. Let's just rerun this and then check what happens. Return redirect, yes. So if I go here and then press ASDF, all right, so that seems to be something wrong. Let's see here. This is called classes. That is a mistake in my table name. That is the reason there was a mistake. So if I go back here and then press enter, you can see I have been redirected to class list. Now I think in which case I don't need this part. So let me remove that. I'll rerun this once more and then go type here view/ and ASDF whatever, and I'll be redirected to class list without a problem. But if I click on this now, I will be going to view/ and learn Python with Socratia, which is a valid class. I haven't defined what to do then. That's what I want to do now. That means we do have a class, and now we need to store all those information in this dictionary. What is that information I want? Let's start one by one. Data of probably class name, And the actual name of the class is going to be CL of 1. What is the CL of 1? If you see, CL of 1 is title, CL of 2 is channel, etc., 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 right? I need the thumbnail most probably, as well as the slug. So let's go here and then store that. Data of probably I can say something like class thumbnail equals to CL of probably it is 3, and then I'll say data of probably class slug. Slug is just a text without any special characters in it. It's all in lowercase with probably underscores or hyphens. That's what actually slug means. And then that's going to be the name of the class itself, whatever the variable that we received over here, that itself I want to store it back as well. So I'll say here class name. So that's one thing. Now for a given class, we now need to load all the lessons, which is the second set of tables. If you look at this, the very first class here has an ID of 1. It's auto-generated ID of 1. If I scroll down over here, you can see that there is a table called lessons, and the lesson itself has a lesson title, lesson slug, some description, some duration of the lesson, what is the video ID in the YouTube, that's what it is. And then we have a class ID, which is a foreign key. So for a given class, there will be multiple lessons. Okay. So we want this information now. So we're going to go get that. We type here cursor.execute, and then we say select star from lessons. That's the table where class underscore ID equals to question mark, and the class ID is nothing but CL of 0. Right? So I have to supply it as a tuple. So CL of 0 and a comma. Now remember the reason why you need to give a comma. Otherwise it will not be considered as a tuple. So you need to give it as a tuple here. So we need to now get all the lessons into a variable. So I'm going to type here lessons equals to cursor dot fetch all. So we get all the lessons. But it is possible that I don't have data for all the classes. So in order to show you what classes exist and what classes don't exist, I'll go to a terminal over here. I have already installed what's called as SQLite 3 in my laptop. So if you try this, you may not get, but I'll just type here SQLite 3, press enter. I'll also type here the name called tutorials.sqlite 3. So it's going to show me all the tables if I want. Now I can simply type here dot tables. It's going to show me that there are 2 tables. Now let's say I type here select count of star from lessons where class ID equals to 1. 1 happens to be that learn Python with Socratia. You can see that there are 33 lessons. For the class number 2, there are 18 lessons. For the class number 3, there are 14. For the class number 4 onwards, I have 0 lessons. I don't have lessons information. Okay, so the DB is incomplete. Only for the first 3 classes, I have lessons. So it is possible that when you execute this query over here, cursor.execute select star from lessons with where class ID equals to question mark, we may get 0 list here or list with 0 content. So we need to ensure that if it is 0, we have to tell the user that there is no class, right? But if there is more than 0, that means 1 or more lessons, then we need to show those lessons as well. So that's the condition I want to use. If len of lessons is greater than 0, we'll store lessons as data of lessons. Remember, this data will be given to that HTML. We give here lessons. That's what we want to do. Now this one for the all the lessons are accessible now. I can go to this and then probably try accessing that also. So if the lessons are available, I also want to show what is the current lessons. Now we'll come back to that in few minutes. For the time being, I'm going to simply say return render template of, let's look at something called view class.html. Remember, we don't have this, but I'm going to supply data equals to data. That means I'm going to send in a dictionary that contains the class name, class thumbnail, and class slug, and then a bunch of lessons if there are lessons available, and that will be accessible to view class HTML. I don't have this file, so I'm going to create a new one. So I'll copy this name, right click on templates, new HTML file. I paste this, press enter. Of course, I don't want anything here, but instead I would like to say this extends from template.html, right? And close this. But we want to replace a block. We say here, block called content should be replaced with whatever that I'm typing right now inside this block. So we'll say end block over here. And this is going to be the name and other details that I want to print. For example, I want to type here, say h3, I'll replace this. Name of the class is nothing but, in curly bracket, you can say data of class name. That's basically like that. How many lessons are there, you can print that also. But for the time being, I'm just going to, if you know the thumbnail, we can display that also. So I can say img src equals to, I think I named it as data of class thumbnail. So where is this? If you go and check, if in main, you can see that I've stored class name, class thumbnail, etc. So let's just see if we are on the right track. So I'm going to go to the run and rerun this and go back over here. If I click on any of these, it should tell me the name of the class, that is learn Python with Socratia, and that image should be displayed over there. There seems to be an error. We'll see what is that. Let's go back over here. I think there must be a double curly bracket. I must have given a single curly bracket or something like that. So you can see that it says here data of class name expected a bracket. I think I did not give a closing square bracket. That's a dictionary and I'm accessing the key. Rerun this, go back and refresh. You can see that I got name of the class learn Python with Socratia. So we go to view classes, select any class for that matter. You can see that I'm able to get the name of the class and then this. But of course, if I make some typing mistake here and press enter, you can see that it's taking me back to this. So for each class, I have a bunch of lessons. I want to display the lessons now. I don't need this image to be displayed over here, but just in case if there is no, let's say for example, there are no lessons available, then in that case, I want to probably print this thumbnail and then say, hey, we don't have any lessons for this particular class. So how do I do that? I go back to this section. Let me get rid of this part. And then I check here if lessons is not a member of the dictionary called data, then we'll display something. But if it is there, then we'll display something else. So we're going to use an if condition like this. This is for if, and let's just copy this, paste. This is going to be for if. You can say lessons. Is it a valid key in dictionary called data? And then of course I have to say end if. And the another condition is going to be quite the opposite of this. I'm going to copy paste over here. I'll simply say not in. And this is where I need to display an error. Now, why is it not there? If you go and check in code here, only if lessons are there, then I'm storing that, right? If there is no lessons, like I showed earlier, for few of them, you can see that anything that is ID greater than or equals to 4, I don't have any lessons over here. So obviously, it's this attribute is this particular key is not there in the dictionary at all. So this will be executed. So what do I want to display here? Probably I want to display a message, say H3. Probably I can say, hey, sorry guys, we don't have any lessons for this class. What is the name of the class? Probably you can say the name of the class being H2. I'll give probably, I'll say this is the name of the class, data of, we have to say class name, right? And then I can display here img src equals to, in double curly bracket, I'll say data of something like class thumbnail, right? thumbnail. And close the bracket. I'll also say alt equals to this whole section I copy and paste. Alt is a good practice for search engine optimization, so let's keep it like this. Now if I go back, I can also display this in a nice fashion by typing class equals to img. This is a bootstrap CSS class name, img-thumbnail. Okay, so let's save, let's format it, rerun this. It's important that you rerun. If I go back to home or view classes, I click on this, it doesn't show anything. Of course, there's an error. Let's see what's the error. End if should be one word. That is the problem. That was my mistake. So let's rerun this. Go back, refresh. You see that it is not showing me anything. It's not displaying any content. But if I go here to, let's say, class number 4, you can see that it says, hey, we don't have any lessons for this. Must have made a mistake over here, thumbnail. So B is missing. Rerun this and refresh. You should see now it says, there's still a mistake. Oh, that's not the mistake. Thumbnail, class underscore thumbnail. Let's see, what did I store here? So thumbnail, let's copy this and okay, looks like I don't have a mistake, but maybe there is a path wrong. Let's go check what is wrong with that. Okay, there seems to be something wrong. Let's go and check. View page source. You can see that img src equals to, okay, this image. Oh, I think I have missed a C over there. I've given SR equals to instead of SRC equals to. So that should be fine. Go back and reload. You can see that I have that. We don't have any lessons for this particular class. But if I go here, there is no problem because we are in this section. There is no problem. We haven't displayed anything at this point in time, right? All right, so now that we have taken care of when there is no class, what to do, let's see when there is a class, what do we want? Now, what I want when there is a class is like YouTube shows a list of, like an image or rather the video here, and on the right side, a list of all the topics or all the related videos. So in our case, we need to display the lessons and then the actual lesson being played, right? So that's what we want. So once again, I'm going to use the row column combination. I'm going to say div class equals to row, and the first one I'm going to say div class equals to call dash md dash, let's make it as 8 for the first one. Whereas when you are viewing in any small device or extra small device, I want that to take full width. So I'll say SM12 like this. The second one, on the other hand, would be, of course, the remaining 4, because for a medium device, the first column 8, second column 4, so total of 12. And here, in a small device, both of them will occupy full width. That's what I want. So what do we want in the first one? That's going to be a video. So we'll hold on for that. Temporarily, I want to display an image, src equals to data of it's called class thumbnail, right? That's just a src. There's a temporary fix, so we're going to remove that. And this one is going to be the list of all the lessons. Now, if you remember, data of lessons is a result of all these things, right? Now, obviously, we need to know what is the structure of the lessons table. In the lessons table, I have the 0 is ID, so you can ignore that. I need the title. I only need title, nothing else, the lesson title. And the lesson title to be displayed one below the other. Now, I can just type in a for loop over here, using the Jinja syntax. I can say here for loop and then an end for. So how do I do that? I'll say for. Remember, LSN, I'll take some variable lesson in data of lesson or other lessons. What is this? That's the result of this select statement. We have stored that as data of lessons. We get that. We are looping through that one by one. So LSN is one single loop, one single variable. I'll say end for. What do you want to display there? Now, let's say, for example, I want to just display using a paragraph. Let's just display LSN of 1. You remember what is LSN of 1? LSN of 1 happens to be title. That's all, nothing else. So if I refresh over here and then go back and then reload, you can see I got the list of all the lessons over here. And this is the default thumbnail for that. So any of these things I'm clicking, I'm able to see the topics or the lesson titles and the thumbnail. Of course, I don't want the thumbnail. I need the actual video to be played. So we'll do that in a few minutes, but we'll set it out for now with these things. So instead of displaying it like this, we can format them nicely using a UL-LI combination. So I'm going to type a UL and /UL after the for loop. And also this is going to be a LI, and that's going to be like a bulleted text now. So if I refresh here and then go back, you should see now they're going to look like a bulleted text. So you go to this, it shows like this. But I also want to make one more better thing, that this should look nice and easy. So I'm going to type here class equals to list group, and this is going to be list class equals to list group item. Save it and refresh. Now you see that they're all looking different, looking nice, right? I also want this to be clickable, so I'm going to convert this into a hyperlink. So instead of li, I'm going to say a. I'll also say href equals to somewhere. It has to go somewhere. So now you see that when of course I had to rerun this, refresh back, you can see that they all look like a hyperlink now. I can click on that, but when I click on that, it's going to just come back to the same location. I want to view the class corresponding to this lesson. Remember, lesson also has a slug. That's the next one, right? A lesson of 2. That's going to give the lesson slug. So what I can do is I can build here a ahref to /view/ this is going to be the class and this is going to be the lesson. So this is the class slug, this is the lesson slug, and in the main.py, if you see, we have stored the class slug also. So I'm going to copy this data of class slug, and that's going to be over here, and this is going to be LSN of 2. So I'm just going to copy this part, paste over here, but change this to 2. And if I rerun this, refresh this over here, and if I click on this, let's say interactive help, you can see that it says view/class name or the class slug with the lesson slug. I select this sets in Python. You can see that view/class slug and lesson slug. So it is changing. But I am supposed to do a couple of things. Number one, of course, when I click on this, it should start playing that video. That's anyway we will do at the end. But we also want to know which is the currently selected one, highlighted one. I need to check that, isn't it? So to do that, we can compare this value, which is the current lesson name, with the loop variable, right? So the loop is going on over here. So I need to pick that and then display that. So how do I do that now? I need to make sure that there is a, I want to apply a class name for that. I apply a CSS class that looks like it is highlighted. So to do that, what we're going to do is we get one lesson over here. We want to compare the lesson, the slug, which is this part. Is it equals to what is there in the address bar? So we have not selected the current list. Now that's something that we have to do over here. So we also have to ensure that what is the current lesson, that also we have to do. So as of now, we haven't done anything. So of course, we now have to check, is there a lesson? So I'm going to check here if lesson name that is coming from here, is it there? Is it a valid lesson name? If that's a valid lesson name, then we want to pick, we want to assign the corresponding lesson. If the lesson name is not there, for example, the user simply comes to the class. For the first time, user is clicking. So there's no lesson name. So we want to assume that the lesson 0 is the current lesson. So I'm going to say if lesson name is none, I have to say none like this. I'll say data of, I'm going to say current lesson equals to lessons of 0, the first one. But if it is something is there, like for example, in this case, the user has clicked on hello world in Python. So there is a class, there's a lesson name. Obviously, because there's a lesson name, I want to pick that lesson and make it as the current lesson. So how do I do that? I'll say here, cur.execute select star from lessons where slug equals to question mark, and that slug is nothing but the lesson name. So I'll type here lesson name as a tuple, lesson name as a tuple. So when I execute this, I would get a single lesson object or lesson record. For example, let me copy this part from the address bar. This is one lesson slug. And if I go to my terminal over here, inside this, I'm going to say here, select star from lessons, where slug equals to, in quotes, I'm going to paste that and press enter. You can see that I got one lesson information. So the lesson number 2, hello world in Python, and corresponding video and all those stuff, I get that. Okay. So everything is there. So we got that information. So that's what we want to see now. So we got that lesson information and we assign this data of current lesson equals to, and then assign cur.fetch1. Now this also should be done when you haven't typed something arbitrarily. Like for example, what if I type here or remove some of these characters from here, right? So, ASDF, what if I type here ASDF? Now obviously there is no lesson with this name, and obviously that's something wrong. So I want to pick the first lesson in that case. So instead of directly assigning it over here, I can assign this to probably a variable, something like say cur lesson, like this, current lesson. And then I check here if cur lesson, right? If current lesson is none, that means you didn't find any lesson. Let's assign this to be the same thing, 0th one, first one. And else I'm going to say current lesson, right? So because there is a data, we are assigning that one. But if there is no data, I'm going to take the first lesson. And all these things happen only if there are lessons with the given class. For the class, if there are some lessons. So now you see we have introduced a new member in the dictionary called current lessons or cur lesson. And now using this cur lesson, we can now start displaying the data over here on this section. Well, we'll come back to that in a few minutes. What I want to do now is that when I select something, this particular selected class should be highlighted now, so that I know that I'm in this particular session. When I click on something else, the highlighting should go to that one. So to do that, in here now I can check whether the slug for LSN, is it equals to the slug in the current lesson? That's what we want to check. So if they match, then we want to assign a value. We want to declare probably some kind of a CSS class name. Now how do I do that? It's going to be simple. So I'm going to write an if condition over here. And the way I can write an if condition is something like this. I'll say set something called CL active. Maybe you can say current lesson active or something like that, equals to active only if lesson LSN of 5. What is LSN of 5? LSN is a record in the lessons. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's just check it out. This is 0, 1, 2. I think I can compare that with any of them. I think I can compare that with this particular slug, which is So basically I can compare it with the lesson 0 also, because I have the entire object over here. So I can say here, I can check with LSN of 0 is equals to data of cur lesson, that's one complete current lesson object, of 0. So you compare the nth index with the nth index. If they match, then let's make that as active. Otherwise, I can say an empty string. So what is this CL active? Now the word active here is basically a Bootstrap CSS class name. So along with the class list group item, if I add this active, that becomes highlighted. That's like active link, that's all. So note that this condition will match only for a single record, right? Because not all of them are active lessons, isn't it? So only one of them is active lesson. And I'm simply going to add here a double curly bracket like this with a space, of course, and then type here the variable CL active. So I created a variable called active, CL active, which has a value of active or an empty string. So basically for everything it's going to be empty string except for one of them, and that one of them will be active. That's all what we're going to do here right now. So I'm going to go rerun this and then refresh, or I can click on one of them and you can see that that is applied. Now how is this happening now? If you right click here and then view source or inspect, you can see that that one has a class of active, whereas the other ones don't have a class of active, right? The word active applies only to one of them. That is the reason why we are getting this highlighted. I select something else, the highlighting comes to that one. So more or less we are done with our project, except that I now need to display a video over here. So how do I display the video? So everything else is ready. So if I go to view classes, I go here, I see the classes, I can select the class, it's all working fine. The URL is changing. The only thing now that is remaining is, instead of the image here, I want the actual video to be displayed. So how do I display the video? Now, while YouTube provides an embed link, so if you look at this, any youtube.com video, if you select, let's select some advertisement over here. Let's click on this. All right. No, that's an ad. That's why I'm not able to do anything. All right. So if I click on this, you can see that they provide an option to share. I believe somewhere here, share. They have an option to embed, and you can see you can copy this and paste in your code. And the only thing that matters is this part, which is the ID of that image, of that video. This is the ID. So if I want, I can copy this and paste over in my remember I had given a IMG data, etc. So I'm going to paste that over here. Let's make this something readable. Let's give all of these. All right, so there's an allow full screen. All right, so I have an iframe/iframe, and the only thing that needs to be changed is this, which is the video ID. That's all. Now, right now, if I rerun this and then play, you should see that everywhere that James Bond movie or whatever that movie I selected, that's going to be there. Some captain stuff, right? So instead of that, I can supply here in double curly bracket the current lesson. I think I made a mistake. Yeah, no, this is the current one. So you need to type here data of cur lesson, right? What is the ID? The video ID. The video ID is basically in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the fifth one, video ID. Now that's actual YouTube video ID. If you have a look at that over here, if you scroll down, you may see at the almost at the end, there's a video ID here, and there's a video ID here, there's a video ID. These are all the YouTube video IDs. So we need to give here that fifth element in that happens to be the video ID. So if I rerun this here now and then click on one of that, you can see that we got the video, but that's actually showing me that it's a video. When I click on that, I may see some advertisements and stuff like that. Okay, but otherwise our application is pretty much done. So if I click on this, I will be able to get that, and so on and so forth. Right now, if you don't want to embed the YouTube video, because I can click on this and go to YouTube directly, right? So we don't want to really do that. So we don't want to give this YouTube logo, or sometimes YouTube will also start displaying advertisements. And if I don't want those ads and stuff like that, what we can do is we can use some custom third-party video players, and one of them is called PLYR. If you look at a PLYR player, plyr.io, that is a simple customizable video player, and they have provided here few options as how you can use and all the stuff. You need to download this and start working with that. And they have given here how you can include and all the stuff. Okay, you can use this player directly. You can download that if you want. There must be a download link somewhere over here. If you go to dist, all right, so this is basically a distributable one. Must be there is a download option somewhere. I'll give the link directly to you somewhere. Okay, but once you got it, you need to import, and you need to basically create that. Okay, so the way this works is you need to create a section here, a div, where you want to place the video. So to do that, I'm going to remove this iframe now. I don't need this. I'm going to give here a div whose ID equals to, let's give any name you want. You can say, for example, vid underscore plyr. Some ID, that ID is important. We will see where. And then I'm going to go give here a style. You can give any style you want. I just want to make sure that this cannot cross more than 90% of your screen height. So I'll say max height of 90 visual height, or whatever it is. Okay, viewport height. It's called viewport height. And then I'm going to put inside that, probably I'll type another div. And this ID is the one that we want. So I'm going to say here vid, let's just type here ID equals to, in fact, I don't need ID for this one though. I think I'm going to just give the ID for this. But here we need to give a couple of things. Number one is that data. Now all these are controlled by the third-party video player that I'm going to use. So PLYR, you need to read the documentation of this, which is available over here, as how you can do all those things. The documentation explains what are the various features and properties, how to use all this stuff. Okay, now I'm going to simplify for you all this. So yeah, so I'll just go back over here. You need to say provider equals to, who is this? Because you have the video sources from many places, like YouTube is one of them. You have Vimeo and other places. So I'll say this is coming from YouTube. The other property that you may want to give is some branding. Do you want the branding and stuff like that? You can say here data dash player config equals to some parameters you need to supply. So like this, don't worry what is this, but some of them, again, like I said, you can go and look at what is this. So I'll type here modest branding. Like you want to have your own branding, I'll say no. And then some more basic features you may have to specify. Very important is data dash PLYR, that's a dash there, dash embed dash ID equals to, this is the ID that is represented by my data of, I think it's called curl lesson, and of 5, that's the video ID in my database. And you just have to close this, that's it, nothing else. Right now there's no magic, it's not going to come because I haven't added the library yet. So if I go here and refresh, you're going to see an empty space. There's nothing else, because if you go and see view page source over here, we do have all those stuff, right, including the video ID, but who is going to convert this div into a video player, right? Somebody should do that. And that somebody is this library. We need to download this and add that. I have already downloaded that and it's kept in my folder here called static player. You can see player.css, player.min.js. I'm going to copy this folder, copy this entire folder, come back to my editor, paste right inside this. It should be inside that, not inside the templates or anything, parallel to templates. So I'm going to paste and everything is okay. So inside the static, I have these files. One other thing that you have to do now is to refer to this CSS and JavaScript. How do I do that? And since this is required in almost all my files, I go to template HTML, the home page. Here I'm going to say that I want a link to that CSS, the player CSS and whatever the JavaScript I have, all those things I need to give. Now this is a little tricky as how you do this, but I'll show you how you can do that. And this is a one-time job. So you need to type your link, rel equals to style sheet like earlier, type equals to text slash CSS, and href equals to, now this is where you're going to provide expression. So let me close this over here and then type this expression. And inside this expression, you're going to say that, hey, I want to provide a URL for, and we want to say that the URL is coming from static folder. That's the folder name that I have over here. And the second parameter for this happens to be the name of the file, which is nothing but plyr.css. But that is inside a folder called plyr, so we have to give that also, plyr/plyr.css. And that's going to give me the CSS, not a problem. If you want to know whether this is working or not, just rerun this and go to the browser, refresh. You won't see much, but if you right click and go to inspect and go to the network tab over here and then do a refresh, you should see that there is a CSS file that's going to come, and plyr CSS. You should see the status code 200. That means everything is okay. If I had a mistake, then this would be 404. For example, if I didn't type this folder path, like if I had just given this much, you will see that it's going to come back with 404, indicating that it is not found, right? So if you have given properly, that means it's going to come back with 200. While CSS is only for styling that, you also need the JavaScript, and the JavaScript is going to be included in the similar fashion, but except that it's going to be using a script, src equals to, and then slash script. Now it is very important to give a slash script. You see here I'm not giving slash link, but here it is important. Once again, it's the same syntax, but in here it's going to be for min.js. That's the minified version of JavaScript file. So if I rerun this and then if I do a refresh, you should see that there should be a JavaScript file also now without any problem. It says 200. Okay. All right. So the last part is where you have to create an object of the class provided by this guy. How do I do that? Very simple. So come down at the bottom. Somewhere here, it's best to do just before body, type here script/script, and I just have to type here new and then say plyr and then give the ID of the ID that I have given in my template HTML, right? So not in the template HTML, in the view class HTML. So the view class HTML, if you go here, I think I've closed it. View class HTML, I gave the ID as with player, so I'm going to copy that, and in template HTML I have to simply say hash, and this hash generally correspond to an ID. And then if you want the video to be automatically played, you can also say here something like auto play. I think I need to give it in quotes. Let's just check. No, auto play of 1. And this indicates that the video should start playing automatically. So that's it. If I go refresh, go back and then refresh over here, you can see that we have a video. It didn't play automatically. That's kind of a surprise. We'll see that. All right, you can see it's playing automatically as well now, right? click on that, and a different video being played, click on that, a different video being played. All right, so let's click on this and a different video being played. So I go to view class, I select a different class, different lesson, and that's all working just fine. One last check is if I type here something wrong, press enter, it's going to start playing the first video. That also is taken care of. If I remove some part of the class name itself, it's an invalid class, it's going to go to the class list. So that is working just fine now, right? So that's how you can create this entire application. And I hope you guys understood and have the confidence to do the same thing. So I wish you all the best. See you in another video.